Morning. So I've completed, is my mic good? Can everybody hear me good? Okay. So I've completed 2 years of ministerial school and I've got a year left to go. I graduate June 16th of 2025 is when I'll be ordained. And so back in March, going into this last year of school, I set the intention that I wanted to shift from studying to doing, from the intellectual to the practical. So little did I know when I set that intention back in March that the opportunity to be your spiritual leader would come about. So I am thrilled to be here. I am humbled that you have selected me, and I am excited for what's in store for us for the next year. So thank you all very much. All right, so a little girl is talking to her mom, and she says, "Mom, I want to be an astronaut someday." And the mom, wanting to be encouraging, but also practical, she says, "Okay, well, if you want to be an astronaut, you're going to have to study really hard. You're going to have to get into a great college, and you're going to have to pass a pretty intense physical fitness test." So the little girl takes this all in and thinks, and looks at her mom and smiles and says, "Well, that's easy. That's only 3 things." So today we are starting on a 2-week series on the 5 principles of unity. And they're just 5 things. But like that little girl, I think we might find that these 5 principles are more involved than they might look on the surface. So first, a little bit of history. The Unity movement was founded in 1889 by a couple, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. So it really started with Myrtle. She started going to these talks and these lectures and these sermons that were talking about the power of our mind to heal and transform our lives. And she had this aha moment in one of these talks where E.B. Weeks said, "You are a child of God, therefore you do not inherit sickness." Myrtle was a really sickly girl and had been told all her life that she was born sickly. She had tuberculosis. She had a lot of health problems. And so after hearing this, having this aha moment, she started doing the work and putting the principles into practice to heal herself. And she ended up living to be 97 years old. So eventually her husband, Charles, was convinced and he said, "Okay, fine, I'll see what all of this is about." So Charles started attending some of the lectures with her and ended up getting just as invested as Myrtle was into these teachings. So over 100 years, they grew the unity movement into what we're seeing today. And in those first 100 years, they started licensing teachers and ordaining ministers to help spread these teachings and the powerful transformations that they were witnessing in their lives all across the world. And today, unity is in almost every country. We have a thriving ministry in Nigeria. We're ordaining more ministers actually in Africa than we are in the United States right now. So it's a worldwide movement of positivity and spiritual growth and transformation. So over those first 100 years, there became a need to be able to concisely tell people what exactly unity is. So it was actually Connie Fillmore Bazzi, who is the great granddaughter of Charles and Fillmore, who put together these 5 principles. So these 5 principles are based on the original teachings of Charles and Myrtle and those original teachers and ministers, but they're designed to pull from all of the world's major religions and spiritual traditions. So in shaping the 5 principles true to her great grandparents' teachings, Connie wanted to pull together that thread of truth that runs through everything. She really viewed the different religions as different packagings, all pointing to the same core essence, that same core truth. Ellen Davenport, she's a Unity minister and author and actually in charge of all of Unity's publishings worldwide, says that the 5 principles suggest answers to the great questions of existence that humans have been asking since the dawn of conscious awareness. You know those big questions. Why are we here? Is there a God? What is God? What does it mean to be human? Easy questions, right? So that is what the 5 principles are seeking to answer. And I'm going to share with you today, we're going to go over the first two, and then we'll do the next three next week. I'll share with you the original wording that Connie used, as well as some wording that you may hear out in the world. You'll find that they've been reworded, so different Unity churches use slightly different versions of them. Actually, last term, one of my assignments was to read about the 5 principles from 6 different Unity authors and then write my own 5 principles in my own words. So I've done a lot of research on this. I've done a lot of digging into what the 5 principles are and what these great Unity teachers and spiritual leaders have to say about these big questions of our lives. So regardless of the version that you find, there's a fun little way to remember the 5 principles using your 5 fingers. So God is, I am, I create, I pray, and I live. So those are the 5 principles in a very easy to remember form. This is what the kids learn from a young age if they start attending Unity Sunday school. So God is, I am, I think, I pray, I live. So today we're going to be talking about God is and I am, and then next week we'll cover the other 3. All right, so what are the 5 principles? I want to start by saying what the 5 principles are not. The 5 principles are not a creed or a doctrine or something that you have to believe. The 5 principles are an invitation. They're an invitation to explore your concept of God and of yourself, to wrestle with it, to ask questions, to notice, and to maybe even step into one of these principles with the idea that I don't know if this is true, but what if I just pretended that it was? How would that make a difference in my life? So the 5 principles are designed to be used in our lives, and they are designed to be questioned. One of Ellen Davenport, that minister I talked about earlier, says that do not call the 5 Unity principles the 5 basic principles, because they're anything but basic. You could spend your entire life going deeper and deeper into understanding these great spiritual truths. So what I offer you today is from my research and my understanding of my best knowledge of the 5 principles for me today. And I offer it to you as an invitation for you to wrestle with it yourself. So principle means that it's true for everyone all the time. That's what the word principle means. So if you take, for example, the principle of gravity, doesn't matter if you believe it or not, right? Gravity is always in effect. So Unity, as well as pretty much every other spiritual tradition we have on this planet, believes that there is a greater reality than just what we can observe with our 5 senses that underlies all of existence. And so Unity teaches that those are spiritual principles, spiritual laws that are in effect all the time, and that we can choose to cooperate with them or not. And just like gravity, our life tends to go better when we cooperate with it. So as I go through these first 2 principles, I want to invite you to just notice what's going on in your body and in your mind. You might find that something I say just makes your heart warm. It makes you want to just throw your hands up and say, amen, or yes, right? That was principle number 2 for me when I first heard it when I was a teenager. But I also want to offer that there might be things that you hear that make you, I don't know about that. Put your hands up a little bit, maybe start to doubt, I don't know if that's true. And that's perfectly fine too. Like I said, these principles are designed to be wrestled with. I want you to think about it like going to a buffet or a potluck. When you first show up at the buffet, you go for your favorites, right? For me, it's always the mac and cheese. I'm going to fill my plate with the mac and cheese first, and then I'll find some other foods. And so you take your favorites from the buffet or from the potluck and you chew on that for a while, and it's great and you know you like it. And then maybe when you're ready to go back for seconds, maybe that thing that didn't look so appetizing before, maybe you decide to try it. Maybe it ends up better than you thought it was. So the 5 principles are an opportunity for you to see what resonates and what gives you resistance. And maybe when you're ready, you go into that resistance and see if there's some lesson or something for you to find out there. So these are just 5 things, just 5 principles that the Unity Worldwide Movement has agreed on. And yet still, we are a community of free thinkers. I like to say that we're always going to abide by the words of our co-founder, Charles Fillmore. I reserve the right to change my mind. All right, so let's start with principle number 1, God is. There is one presence and one power active as my life and as the universe. God, absolute good. Said another way, God is all. God is everywhere and always present in every circumstance. This divine energy underlies and animates all of existence. So I used to have this idea of God, this image of God, as an old man with a long white beard somewhere up there, watched everything that I did, decided if I was good or bad, and either rewarded me or punished me based on it. I mean, basically Santa Claus, right? That was my image. And so this first principle invites us to move from the idea of God as a supernatural being, as a human-like entity that exists outside the world, looking down on us, only to occasionally intervene to fix this or bless this person or punish this person. The first principle invites us to move from that to the idea of God as the one presence and one power underlying and animating all of existence. Not a God out there somewhere, but a God woven into everything that we see, touch, feel, experience. A God that is intimately involved and part of the world. A God that is the very source of this world. The creative force, the animating life force of all that is. It's a little better than a judgy Santa Claus, right? So God is the one presence and one power means that we are one with the divine. That like fish, we're not even aware that we're swimming in water. That we are living, moving, and having our being in the very essence of God, as it says in Acts 17:28. Another Unity minister describes it as God is a circle whose center is everywhere and circumference is nowhere. In 1984, Unity minister Charles Roth referred to God as a vibration, eternally filling every part of creation. One thing I'm continually amazed about as I study some of these classic Unity teachers is how far ahead of their times they were. I'm going to get a little sciencey for a second. I wasn't really planning to do this, but I'm feeling it. So has anybody heard anything about like quantum physics? Yeah, right? So quantum physics is basically flipping our entire view of reality on its head. You know that old joke, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's around to hear it, does it make a sound? And you would say, yes, of course it does, right? Because existence is independent of me. If it falls, it's still making a sound whether anybody's there to hear it or not, right? That's what I was taught. Quantum physics says, maybe not. That it actually takes the awareness, it actually takes consciousness to observe something for it to be real. So these Unity authors were talking about these theories and this nature of God without having any of the language that we have today to explain it. So in 1984, a minister referring to God as a vibration, eternally filling every part of creation. That makes way more sense to us today than I think it did to his contemporaries. Let's go back even further to 1952. Lowell Fillmore, the eldest son of Charles and Myrtle, also a Unity minister, said, God is the very life that fills your being. Not the blood exactly, but the spirit of life that causes the blood to be and to flow. So unity teachers describe God as the creative force behind all that is, that necessary component that makes everything else possible, the ultimate original cause to every effect. In the Gospel of Thomas, it says, I am the light that is over all things. I am all. From me all came forth, and to me all attained. Split a piece of wood, I am there. Lift up the stone, and you will find me there. So unity teaches God as principle, unchanging. Just like gravity doesn't change, God doesn't change. Was always here, will always be here. And so God as principle means that spirit does not pick and choose who to reward or who to punish. So God as principle shifts us from a capricious God to a God that is a field of pure love and intelligence. If you've ever read the Bible or done any studying of it, you'll hear people talk about the Old Testament God versus the New Testament God as if it's somebody different. But when you read the Bible, it really does seem like that, doesn't it? Because in the Old Testament, that God picked and chose the winners of wars and smited enemies, right? And then we get to the Christian scriptures and what Jesus taught about God as all loving Father. So my question is, did God change, or did our perception and our understanding of God change? We're not talking much about the Bible today, but it is a big part of unity because Charles saw the Bible as a roadmap to the growth of an individual's consciousness. That as we look at how the God in the Bible changes based on how it's described, we see a growth in the consciousness of humans and a deepening of their understanding of their relationship to the divine. So one power and one presence that is absolute good, all that is, means that no one and nothing is against me. Another theme that you find in the Bible, as well as in pretty much all of our human stories, is this idea of good versus evil, right? There's this perpetual war, and it kind of assumes the fact that there's a chance evil might win. God is the one presence, one power, all good. Means that no one and nothing is against me. This principle offers you the invitation to not look at reality as a fight between two opposing forces. This is one of those ones that people can really struggle with. Because if you say God is all good, what about all the bad stuff, right? So that's for another day. I'm not going to get into a whole theological debate on that one. But I want to leave you. Greg's wiping his brow. But I want to leave you with what New Thought author Emmett Fox said. God is the only real presence. All the rest is but shadow. God is perfect good, and God is the cause only of perfect good. God never sends sickness, trouble, accident, temptation, nor death itself. From James 3:11, the same fountain cannot send forth both sweet and bitter water. All right, so God does not ride to the rescue. That's what principle one is offering us. That what we call God is a force of energy, not a supernatural being that intervenes in our lives. And how that divine energy expresses is up to you. So that brings us to principle number two. So God is, I am. Principle number two is about the nature of humanity. It says our essence is of God. Therefore, we are inherently good. Said another way, human beings have a spark of divinity within them, the Christ spirit within. This essence of God was fully demonstrated in Jesus and other master spiritual teachers throughout history. So the easiest way for me to explain principle number two is if we take principle number one, God is all there is and God is nothing but good, how can we be anything but? I love this because it really flips the idea on its head that we're born into original sin. Unity teaches we're born into original blessing. Do we miss the mark? Do we make mistakes? Do we screw up sometimes? Sure, of course we do. But principle 2 says that that spark of divinity within us, that Christ essence, your highest self, your spiritual nature, continually urges us toward good. That the very nature of God flows through us and out into the world, that we can never be separated from that. I think Alfred Lord Tennyson said it best when he said that God is closer than breathing, nearer than hands and feet, the very presence of the divine within us. So my husband Dane went to a Jesuit high school. Jesuits are an order of Catholic priests who go out into the world as teachers, doctors, journalists. And so at this high school, their senior year, they had this big assignment where they had to write a paper and then essentially defend it like you would a master's thesis and get into these debates with the priests at their school. And so he told me this story about how the priest asked, would you really want to live in a world where no one believes in God, where people can just do all of the bad things that they want because they're not afraid of punishment? And my husband's response was, I'm more afraid of a world where the only reason people aren't doing bad things is because they're afraid of punishment. So when we express our divine nature, we are rewarded for it because we are in harmony with that spiritual law. Just like if you jumped off something tall, you're not being punished because you did something bad. It hurts because gravity is true and you're acting out of accordance with it. And so when we do something that is not in alignment with our spiritual nature, we are not punished by someone else for doing that because we're bad. We have a not so great experience because our action was out of alignment with the truth of who we are. That one presence, one power flowing through me, through you, through all of us means that if I hurt you, I'm hurting me too. And so that spark of divinity, as we get in touch with that inner true essence, leads us towards harmony and love and wisdom and forgiveness, because that fulfills that spiritual law, that spiritual truth. So unity teachers believe that it was from the perspective of this essence of divinity within us that Jesus was speaking when he said, no one comes to the Father except through me. That by seeking to know our divinity within and act and think and live from that perspective, that we get closer and closer to demonstrating our oneness with the divine. Now, one piece that can get a little tricky here is really the same in principle number 1. Well, what about the bad stuff? We're not great all the time, are we? So we like to look at 2 different sides of being human. We've got that divine side, our Christ essence, our spiritual self, our capital S self, the part of us that is eternal, that will never die. And then we have the human self, the lowercase s self, our personality, or sometimes we hear it called the ego. So sometimes what happens is we start making a war between our human self and our spiritual self, our ego and our Christ. Oh, I was acting from ego that day. And we start making it like our spiritual nature needs to overtake our human nature, as if that were possible, right? So I want to invite you to look at the benefits of being human. I don't find this in a lot of unity teaching, so this is just me, but I don't think that our eternal spirit that knows its oneness with God, that remembers that all is one, would choose to come here and be human if there weren't some reason for it. right? So there's a parable in the Bible about the prodigal son. And basically, it's this father. He has two sons. One stays with his father, does everything he's supposed to do. One goes out into the world and spends all his dad's money and raises a bunch of, and then comes back to his father. And the question that Jesus asks is, which one does the father love more? And in the story, it's the one who went away and came back. So perhaps being human is our opportunity to make that journey back, to remembering our oneness with God, to discover for ourselves how much easier, more prosperous, more abundant, and more joyful our lives are when we seek to live from the knowing that at our core we are divine. We are one with all that is. So, by fanning the flames of that spark of divinity within us, Jesus, the man, the person, is the one who we believe showed us the way. And so, in our next week, we're going to talk about some of those ways that we seek to live and express that Christ essence, that true self within us. But I'm running the risk of going over time, so we're going to move into our meditation right now. All right, I want to invite you to close your eyes, to take a moment to just get comfortable. Your back against the chair, your feet on the floor. Let's take a nice, slow, deep breath in and let it out. And as you settle into this moment and this place, here and now, I want to invite you to allow yourself to rest. We talked about some really, really big subjects today. And I want to invite you to take a moment to just let them settle. You don't have to do anything with them. Just let them land. Focus on your breath and allow your body to relax. I want to invite you to picture in your mind's eye a stream of brilliant white light pouring into the top of your head. You have no idea where this light is coming from. It's far, far out above you. But you know when it touches your scalp, it makes it tingle. It feels warm and nourishing. Picture this light flowing in through the top of your head, cascading down your shoulders. Picture this light surrounding you. This light, this healing light, this light is always here, whether you are aware of it or not, connecting you to all that is, reminding you that you are limitless, that you are one with creation, healing and transforming you, uplifting you and nourishing you. Allow this light to warm you as you rest in the silence. As you bask in the glow of this light, I invite you to affirm silently in your mind or softly out loud, I am that. I am all that is. When you're ready, come on back and open your eyes. Thank you. Gonna let it shine. This little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine.